Hey everybody, welcome back to the Uncommon Truth podcast. I'm here again with Steve and Vicki.
How are you doing, everybody?
Hey.
We are, as you can see if you're watching on YouTube, we're still wearing the same outfits as last time.
Yeah.
So
Except me.
Steve.
Except me. I've totally changed my outfit. I'm in a completely different...
Don't tell him what it is. I walked in today
I'm in a
and he was wearing
completely
this.
different...
so you probably should look on YouTube.
Yeah, if you're
We'll
just
get more
listening to
views.
audio, then go to YouTube and check out
my
Steve's new outfit.
identity changes right now.
Because we've done two.
Yeah, so
we might be in England right now.
you probably are, yes.
Yes, while you're hearing this.
But
I will probably wear it Sunday to preach.
Oh, for the
So
love
in
of
England,
no, here. Oh, in England would be perfect. That would be
my
perfect.
God.
They already think we're all cowboys.
Yeah, wear your cowboy shoes.
yeah,
Boots.
that would go down like a
Nothing. Like
lead
a-
balloon.
Oh my
like a lead
gosh.
balloon. Yep.
But that could be
So
fun.
we could be rummy or could be a little goofy right now because this is the second one in a row.
Yeah, but last time was good. We talked about falling in love with Jesus
great.
and working for him. And
Yes.
today we'll just dive right in, I think. So
Why not?
one of the things that you coined at the Father's house is the idea of the four-headed monster, which are some things in our hearts that come up and cause trouble. And we'll go over what they are in a moment. But just my thought is these are some of the very things that hinder us from being able to fall in love with Jesus in the first place and love one another. So
Yeah, this you'd find this, most definitely in Matthew 7 with, forgiven you shall be forgiven, forgive not and you shall not be forgiven.
Yes.
And judge not and you will not be judged, but judge and you will be judged. Good measure.
Yeah.
What you give, given you shall receive. With
Yes.
good measure be measured back to you. Pressed down, shaken together, running over. Everyone's familiar with that as a, like for giving money and receiving money, correct? So everybody really wants the money to be given to them, right? So the verse about these things, I want to start with a little story about. I was so anti this message about forgiveness, and it's all. I mean, you're either forgiven or you're not, kind of thing, right? I'm not going to buy anything else, and yet Christians were so unable to get free from certain things. I knew people couldn't stop biting their fingernails, couldn't stop pulling their eyelids out. Their what's it called? Eyelids. Eyelashes. Thank you,
Yes.
Vicki. Pull their eyelashes out. They couldn't stop, and people just aren't free. And I was arguing against myself, really, just arguing against my own belief. But people were just struggling, and I just didn't believe that what your sins could be, that your attitudes could affect your life, because Jesus is it's all under the blood. He lives in me. I just can't have that much power. So I realized, though, that when you read the 18th chapter of Matthew with the wicked manager who got forgiven a great debt, but then went out and held another guy to his debt, then the master who forgave the first debt heard of it, called him in and said, "Shouldn't you have forgiven? Since I forgave you this great debt, shouldn't you have forgiven your servant a little debt?" And he puts him back in jail and makes him serve the penalty. And it says, he will serve until every sin is paid. And the last phrase of that story is, and this is how your heavenly Father will deal with you if you do not forgive. And so this, for me, started my theology change, because there are areas in my life that are really clear. I changed. The Bible changed me. The truth of the Bible just changed me. I was standing on what I'd been told, what I'd heard preached, what people said all the time. What I wanted to believe, really, was we're just free from all this stuff. But in reading the 18th chapter and the wicked manager story, it suddenly dawned on me, this guy was forgiven and ended up serving in jail until every penny was paid. How does he pay every penny in jail?
Yeah.
So he was permanently in jail, basically. There's no way to pay it back if you can't work. And so I realized, and I started asking people, do you think the sins you've been forgiven can be put back on you? And nobody believed that. Well, what about this story that Jesus told? And this guy was forgiven, but because he refused to forgive, the very sins he were forgiven for came back to him, and he served the sentence.
So good.
And so I realized, maybe I'm the ignorant one. Jesus says this, and I've been saying that. Maybe I should go back and just believe what Jesus says and try to let my theology be formed and fashioned by the Bible instead of what everyone says. Well, right after that, he talks about judge and you shall be judged. Judge not, and you shall not be judged. By the measure you use in mercy will be the measure used for you in mercy. And I began to want to know, what does judged mean, man? Because Paul tells us that we shouldn't even associate with the immoral brother. And he's saying, can't you judge these things? So they must be two different meanings of the words judged, what Jesus is saying and what Paul's calling the church to do. Well, Paul explained, he says, I'm not talking about people outside the church. I'm talking about people inside the church. People who claim to be holy, you are to judge their actions and discriminate between truth and lies and right and wrong. So I'm looking at this, and then judge and you shall be judged. I mean, and so the measure you use. So what does judge mean? Well, this particular judge is to make the final determination, like they're going to hell. To make a decision about you will be damned, or damn you, you know, to make the final determination in wording causes me to have the same exact final determination that I gave. So if I say he's going to hell, I'm saying I'm going to hell. And I'm like, nobody teaches that. But that's what that word means in that verse. And I'm like, well, we always say, well, hey, you're saved, buddy. You believe you're saved. You're saved. Well, that also is a final determination.
Wow.
And I'm forbidden from doing that. And so it doesn't mean right or wrong. It says, do not make a final determination. That's the judgment. This is God's place to judge. And if you make determinations that somebody over here doing wrong that's never going to be saved, you say they're going to be saved, you're going to be deceived by the same measure and thought you're saved when you're not saved. Wow. And it's like this deception of the mind is I create it by my own actions. Well, you just keep going, man. And selfishness and selflessness. We just talked about it in last week about love one another as I have loved you. Well, the very definition of love in the Bible, the New Testament definition of love for God, God loving you, you loving one another, is selflessness. And so the opposite of that is hate, which is selfishness. And so it says if you can't hate, you got to love. And if you want to be right with God, you got to love. And if you'll obey and love, be selfless, not selfish, then He will love, be selfless towards you, and give to you all of what heaven has and not withhold it from you if you will just do this. Envy is, God gave you gifts and talents, and I'm jealous, and I want instead of just being jealous, like I wish I had those, it's no, I want them, and I'm going to take them. Or God gave you this wife, and I want your wife. It's the coveting, and I go work to try to win her heart. That is what envy is, trying to take what you've been given, and not saying I wish I had what you have. I wish I had a wife like that. No, I want that wife, and I'm going to go take your wife. That's really the definition of envy, is to try to, you're the worship leader, but I want to be. So I go and work to discredit you so that I can be the worship leader. I envy you, your position, and I go to try to take it from you. That's envy. And offense is simply being offended. And it's everything Jesus taught against. And so I began this.
Who does not take offense at me, right?
Yes. And I began to develop this four-headed monster message years ago. And, it devours, and I really wanted to find everything that causes a Christian seeking grace, a Christian believing with faith, the doorway into grace, acting on faith, which is how you get grace, which is absolutely free once you've accessed it. And you access it by faith. I wanted to see what is stopping so many people from the faith and the works of faith that Jesus said would procure grace, like fruit bearing branches and oil-filled lamps and foundations on stone, and seed on the good soil, and all of the different parables He told, going on and on and on. Acting upon His sayings and all of those things, denying self, pick up and cross, follow me, all that stuff. What is eating that in so many Christians' lives? And I really came to the conclusion that it was this four-headed monster of envy, unforgiveness, selfishness, and offense. And they are clearly laid out in the New Covenant. And I had denied them for many years. And as I began to look, going, wow, your sins can be put on you. If you don't forgive, you will not be forgiven.
right.
In fact, what you were forgiven will be unforgiven.
That's crazy.
And if you judge, you'll be judged, and you'll be judged in accordance with how you judged. And if you determine people's outcome, someone else is going to determine your outcome. And it's like, whoa, this is serious stuff. So the four-headed monster eats you alive. It's why Christians have a whole belief system that doesn't work to bring them the fruit of the Spirit, peace and patience and kindness and goodness and joy and faithfulness and self-control. It doesn't bring them the fruit of the Holy Spirit because they don't put down this four-headed monster. And I think Vicki is probably one of the foremost authorities I've ever known on this four-headed monster and how to put it down and renounce and reject it.
Yeah, that has been really an incredible revelation since the Lord showed us, and it's like wanting what someone else has, their gifts and talents. That's such a trap, and envy and jealousy. So we used to say it was jealousy, but I think it's more envy, like Steve said. Unforgiveness. That one is like when we really got the revelation of that. We actually read a book years ago called "The Importance of Forgiveness," I think by Carol Arnott. It changed our life because we were so offended, but as Christians, we acted like we weren't offended. And I remember just, seeing people at the supermarket and going the other way because we're offended with them, or that name is so-and-so's name's mentioned and hair on the back of your neck stands up. So it was obvious by my actions that I didn't forgive these people. So the forgiveness now that we seek is really a deep forgiveness, and the Holy Spirit just kind of breathed it into the Father's house years ago about how you forgive. It's you don't walk up to people and tell them everything they did. I don't think that works all the time, except maybe in marriage. I don't know. But we have a thing called inner healing where we deal with a lot of this stuff, and Luke, you know that too, where we're really honest, and it says forgive and you shall be forgive. If you don't be forgiven, you will not be forgiven, and you will not see the heaven. So, I mean, dealing with it in a real way is so essential, and being honest. I don't want what you have. I want what Jesus has for me. I want the gifts and talents for me. And I relayed a story a few weeks ago on this podcast is how I was so kind of envious of my children and my husband because they're wired so differently than I am. And they're so literally incredible forerunners, and they can build things and design things. And they're perfectionists, and I'm just not. I'm just mediocre in some things. And I was really struggling with I don't know what I do well. I'm so envious of what they can do. He can build buildings and people and build lights of hope, and she can do this and she can do that and he can do that. And what about me? I have nothing. And so I was very envious. I remember it's kind of embarrassing. I'm going to go ahead and put it out there because this might be for someone when you're jealous of your children, when you're jealous of their gifts and their talents, or you're jealous of your spouse because they get all the glory or they get all the accolades or whatever. So I just began to go after that, and the Lord showed me eventually what my gifts were. But I mean, these things are part of the world system, and they affect us every day. Yeah. Every day there's causes for me to be offended with someone. Someone cuts you off, they go too slow, they walk too slow, whatever, they flip you off, your husband and your wife, get mad at your kids. But to stay in an unoffended life where you don't hold on to things. I mean, you can be irritated. That's not really offense. It's where you go the other way in the supermarket, or the hair on the back of your neck really stands up. So I think dealing with that in a real way is important.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, let's just talk about each one of them for a second as individuals for a few minutes. Let's start with selfishness, right? Stevie said selfishness can be said as hate. So can we just talk about if we are someone who recognizes, I can get I get selfish or I can be selfish, what sort of impact does that have on your relationship with the Lord and even your relationship with others?
Honestly, selfishness ruins every marriage that's ruined is ruined from selfishness. Children are ruined when they're taught to be selfish, when parents are selfish towards them. Like our whole ministry is based on selfish parents wouldn't take care of their children. They were too weak to discipline them. They were too selfish to spend time with them. They were all about themselves, and they ignored their children and let them raise themselves. Our whole ministry is about people who ignored their children.
We have an addiction ministry.
Yeah, we have addiction and all. I mean, it's way more than that. We have religiously broken kids who were all raised in very rigid religions that were just not paid attention to, not made to feel valuable. And so selfishness has its arms in everywhere, in the poorest of the poor, the richest of the rich. Rich kids grow up and never say 5 words to their parents. I just read a story of a pastor friend of mine. He retired recently, but we served in youth ministry together. And today he was telling the story about he doesn't remember his mom or his dad ever saying once, "I love you." And he remembered going to his house after he was married and saying to his dad, "I love you." And his dad said, "I love you too, son." He had never said that. And it's like, I think it's really important that you make that effort. You create a human being or you marry a person, you are making the statement that I am going to live for you. When you give birth, I am going to live to take care of you, raise you up in the right way, which includes discipline, all the training of etiquette, all the training of learning, like the ABCs and all of those things, arithmetic, writing, and a whole deal, reading. You are committed to be there. Their homework, their teacher meetings, their everything it's your responsibility. But what we're in is an epidemic of selfishness. Fathers abandoning families to watch out for themselves so that they can serve their own needs and lusts and wants. Selfishness is just the root of evil. It is the act of not loving. And selflessness is the laying down of one's life for others, which is the very definition of love. And so you can see how they're diametrically opposed. To serve Jesus, he says, love one another as I have loved you. By this, all men will know that you're my disciples because you love one another. And he says, the way he told you. And then he says, if you love me, my Father will love you. You could take the word love out of all of that. 1 John 4, 7 and 8. Let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loves is born of God. He that loves not does not know God. Beloved, let us love one another. You could take the word love out of all those scriptures and put selfishness. And it would mean it would tell you exactly what it means. It is the biggest word in our daily life. Selfishness or unselfishness. Selflessness. Becoming less than. Considering others as more important than yourself.
Good.
Especially those who are your children and your spouse, your congregation, your family, your friends, your body, the Christian body, right. Serving the church instead of waiting it to serve you.
Yeah. So selfishness, if we leave that unchecked in our lives, it's going to consume you. Consume us.
Yeah, it is one of those vines. I have a vine in one of my places called wisteria. And man, you just look away for a minute. That thing is wrapped up, and whatever it wraps on, you don't just clip it once and pull it it's wrapped, and it's entwined. Wow. And anyone who knows wisteria, it just grows like crazy. It's the fastest growing weed I've ever seen, and it'll cross 20 feet on a trellis in one season, because that's what selfishness is like. It's just fingers just grow out and intertwine and grip, and they take hold of you. And in fact, it terrifies you. If you live a life of selfishness, the idea of becoming unselfish terrifies you. Who will take care of me? Wow. It blows faith out of the water.
So when you hear things like serving, volunteering, giving, all that kind of stuff, there's not too much room for that.
Right. The fact that the church, someone came to me today and said, I went to a church of 100, I had a church of 100 when I was pastor, and I couldn't get 10 people to volunteer on a Sunday morning, take care of all the needs of the church. Of 100 people, couldn't get 10 volunteers 10%. For kids' church, nursery, all that stuff. It's really difficult to get volunteers in the Christian church today because this is not taught.
Well, we need to do something about that, which is good. So then let's move on to let's do offense.
Offense. Well, I talked about it a little bit just a few minutes
Yeah,
ago.
but just where does it, like what impact does that have in our lives?
Oh, it handicaps you. I mean, just this story I told is like when you're offended, those people have control over you.
Yeah.
So just the fact, like I'm not even talking about murder and rape and all the other stuff. I'm talking about people you're offended with that hurt your feelings, that left the church, that said bad things about you. If I'm offended with them, they control me. They control where I go. They control what I think. They control my body. They control my mind. And it's like I just don't want that anymore. It's just, excuse me. I had a phone call. It's so dealing with it in a deep way where it's like you actually verbalize out loud in a room. Like Steve, you really offended me. You did this. You did that. Just between you and Jesus even, and it hurt my feelings, you made me feel this, you made me feel that, but unless I forgive you, I can't be forgiven. And it's like, so I forgive you, Steve, for what you did to me, and I'm going to ask Jesus not to hold those things against you. And then, of course, I've sinned because I've been offended, and that handicaps me as well. So then it's like, well, Lord, forgive me for I've held out against my brother, my sister, because we don't wage against flesh and blood, we principalities. So offense is like so big. It just, I think honestly, it's probably the number one thing that cripples the church today is offenses.
One of the things I see with offense too is it often doesn't just remain with us. I go and tell somebody else about
Correct.
my offense with that person. Now
Very
they're offended too, right?
Correct. Secondhand offense.
Yeah.
And so now you've spread it, and so now, that's what the Lord's really been trying for me in the last 2 years to stay in my lane. Kind of like, don't pick up anybody's thing that's not directly related to you. If, my relationship with you, Luke, is my relationship with you. Your relationship with Steve is not my relationship. If Steve hurt your feelings or vice versa, that's not my gig. That's between the two of you. So I've been really working on trying to stay in my own offenses, because I have enough. I have enough offenses to go ahead and keep me busy most of the days.
Yeah, and also just not spreading your offense to somebody else, right? Like, and
that's hard.
It's hard,
especially being married. Because we'll go home and being quite honest, we'll talk about the day. And it's like, oh my goodness, it's like, so for a spouse, for a husband, he wants to probably go beat somebody up, if they hurt his wife, and then I want to protect his heart that people would do this to him. So you got to be careful. You got to look at the offense, and you got to really try to be unoffendable. Right. Steve's reading a book right now called, Unoffendable? Yeah. Just being unoffendable. Yeah. And I think that's a lifelong pursuit. For me it is. Maybe I'm unusual, but it's pretty much I got to do this a lot.
Yeah. It really has. It's interesting because I'll say this on each item. The root of offense is
selfishness.
Yeah.
Hate.
Right. And it's just it's one of those things that's it's so easy to get offended in a moment.
You know who gets offended the most?
Who?
People who hate themselves.
Well, that makes You got to chip
so
on
it's
your shoulder.
It's a weird thing from selfishness to be defined as hating yourself.
Yeah. Because when we dislike ourselves, we really do feel that anything that somebody does that bothers us, they're not just like, it's not just, oh, they accidentally did that. It's they did that to me.
Right.
Yeah.
We think they don't like us.
We start assigning motive to their actions.
Assigning motive,
you know, and then we get offended, and now they're the enemy, and we just got to learn to.
That's really good.
They probably weren't thinking about you when they did that.
Well, what I love about rejected people, especially, is like rejected people, they're rejected, right? So they think no one considers them. Yet in their rejection, they think everyone's considering them.
Yeah.
In order to offend them. Yeah. And it's like, wait a minute, you don't think anybody thinks about you because you're there, you betrayed and rejected, but yet you think everybody does everything to reject you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, no, it really is, and just to step out of this offense thing, we really need to just
I want to be
not assign motive to people's actions. If they do something that bothers us, like just give them the benefit of the doubt and learn to let things go and love one another regardless. Okay, let's do envy again. I know you talked about that one a fair amount, but when we're stuck in that envious place, how does that affect our relationship with God? How does that affect the church? Like, what does that do?
Everyone who talks about envy falls into jealousy, and they're two different things.
Right.
Jealousy is I just wish I'd have got picked instead of you, and or I wish I could sing like you. I wish I could play the guitar like you. But envy is actually an active wanting to take what you have. And I run across that constantly. People trying to pull me down to try to raise themselves up. If I gain the respect of any group, somebody's going to come along trying to shoot me down and insert themselves. And it's really an amazing thing, because I think the right response to that is nothing, to do nothing. Let them have their say, and not let people do, just not show people that I'm intimidated by it. And it seems to work, but envy is a very damaging and destructive thing to the person doing it. And it can destroy the people you're trying to take from. Like if you go in to break up a marriage, I want your wife.
Right.
I'm going to go and, cause her to fall out of love with you and notice me and lean my way, or I'm going to seduce her. Or it's more likely when pastors like me, when women come to try to take the pastor away from his wife, it's like so weird. It's just like, it's so damaging, but mostly to the person doing it. If the person who is gifted, like has the wife to be envied for, has the pulpit the other person wants, maybe is the worship leader they want to be, they can be totally damaged by someone's envy. Yeah. But they also have control of that. They decide whether envy works. On the other side of the coin, the envier, he's destroyed or damaged. He's deeply wounded and damaged simply by the actions of trying to employ his envy. You follow that?
Yep.
Someone can envy me, and they can come and try to take what I have, and they can't really hurt me unless I engage.
You give them power.
Unless I give them the power. If they want to take my wife away from me, she gives them power to destroy me by entering into that envy, to letting it work.
Right.
So envy is one of those things. One person is definitely destroyed, the envier. The other two people, or one person, however many there is, all have a say in the matter of who else gets destroyed. And it is a very unique monster, and it is very destructive. Yeah. And it happens all the time. Yeah. And people who have been victims of envy, someone come and succeeded in taking their place, they're forever offended. They're forever self-absorbed. They're forever unforgiving. It is very difficult to recover when envy takes a place and removes you and replaces you, or takes what you have. Yeah. Those people are anyone who engages is destroyed. If everybody else says, no, I know who I am, you can't have what I have. And other people say, we're not giving you what he has. We already gave it to him. We're not taking it back to give to you. Nobody's destroyed except the envier quite possibly is injured in serious ways and could be destroyed. Envy's a terrible headed monster. Yeah. It's a terrible, terrible thing to employ ever. Instead of being thankful that God gave that person,
that's right.
I'm happy for you and what you have.
Celebrating what they have, celebrating their success. So one of the big ones is like somebody gets promoted and you don't, right? Yeah. And it's like, they don't deserve that. I do. I'm good.
That's probably the biggest one right there, because the wife thing is it does happen in the church, but in the church it's more, especially like on our team, it's being a pastor is quite a level of accomplishment, and it's just not given freely. So you struggle with that, and somebody gets promoted, like you said before you. It's difficult.
Or why do they get to sing on the stage and I don't, or what, or even in the workplace, that person got the job that I wanted, and that
I've worked harder. I'm this. I've been here longer.
Most of that is
jealousy, but it can take that step up, right?
Envy is when you then actively work to take that guy got the job, and you discredit him. You plant things, news stories, lies, get people gossiping to where they lose their job and you get it. Yeah, it's envy is taking what they have. Yeah.
So it starts in jealousy and then can grow into envy.
That's good.
Yeah. And so usually I guess what is way more common than is the jealousy part. But if we leave that again as a weed unchecked,
Yeah.
it can start to grow into.
Yeah, you start describing it as jealousy.
Yep.
It doesn't have the same destructive nature. You stop at jealousy, like I'm jealous you got the job. I could even say and be your friend. I'm jealous you got the job. I wish I'd have got it.
Right.
But you got it,
I'm
so
happy for you.
I'm gonna go ahead and I choose
choose
to be happy for you.
Yes.
See, I can still have a little jealousy there, but I can, and it's at a level I can deal with it. I can defeat that. I can win that battle. But once you employ envy, where you start to take what somebody else has,
It's good.
you're defeated.
Yeah.
You actually are destroyed, and you're going to need to get saved.
That's good. And lastly, we've got unforgiveness, which is similar to offense, but I think that the sort of differentiating factor is offense tends to be more about the day-to-day, like,
Little things.
this happened, that person cut me off, that person was rude to me, that person didn't say hi to me this morning, like, those sorts of things.
Unforgiveness is clearly and strictly, I want you punished for what you
Right,
did.
exactly. So I was going to say that
I want you to pay.
the unforgiveness is usually the deeper things, and,
yeah.
and often it's I'm refusing to forgive that person for that thing that they did to me, and
It's
I want them
conscious.
to be punished for it, right?
You'll get yours.
Yeah. And they tend to be for those deeper.
Yeah, and
wound
I
type
think
things.
we've heard vengeance. The Lord will get you.
Yeah.
The vengeance is
The Lord will
vengeance is
get
the
you.
Lord's going to get you. I'm not going to get. And it's like that's the heart of that is just wrong.
Second you say that,
You're in trouble.
you're in trouble.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I always like to bring up when we talk about this is to define forgiveness well. So forgiveness doesn't mean that we're saying what somebody did was okay.
No.
Right? What does it mean?
Forgiveness is saying that it's not okay. It's not okay, but getting the poison out of your identity, and just kind of verbalizing all the hurt and pain to Jesus or in a small room, and it's like getting all the adjectives out that you want to say, and it's not saying what you did to me was okay, but unless I forgive you, I can't be forgiven, and it doesn't matter what. This is really hard because when we preach this message. In our congregation, as probably any congregation in the country, our world, there's been atrocities born on women and men at the hands of other people. I mean, just horrible stories. So it's like, they don't want to forgive them. And it's like, yeah, but what you're doing is actually forgiving yourself. You're letting yourself out of jail again, because like even, with the offense, it's like you are totally in their jail. You can't do these things because you hate so much.
Right.
And it actually holds you handicapped. And so it's like, it's never saying that what they did is right. It's like, like a pedophile, I mean, if you had something happen to you as a child and you're an adult and you hate that person and you want them, just whatever. It's not, it's dealing with the place of that hurt and pain and the trauma and just getting all the pain and all the infection out of you, like verbalizing, you did this, you did that, you did this, how dare you, I even hate you. I hate your guts for what you did. I hate you, I mean, sometimes it's so personal, and you just, because of what was done was so personal. And it's but unless I forgive you, I can't be free. And Jesus said that unless I forgive you, I can't be forgiven. So getting all the pain out of your identity and then begin the process. It's not, and so, when it's so traumatic, it's not just a one and done. It's affected every area of your life. Maybe you don't trust men, maybe you don't trust women because whatever, maybe you don't trust authorities. There's always when there's a root, there's always fruit in the consequences of hating. Yeah. Because the truth is when you are unforgiving, it's hate.
Right.
And so it's like, but if he's a pedophile, then after you forgive him, you wouldn't let your kids go stay with him
out,
overnight.
right?
Yeah.
No.
But it's just letting them off the
hook. So you're saying I no longer want you to be punished for what you did to
Correct.
me. I'm letting that go.
And the reason is because I have been forgiven by Jesus
for what I needed
for what
to be
I've
punished for.
done.
Yeah.
And so it's like Jesus forgave me while I was yet a sinner. And he's real. If you read the New Testament, I mean, study for yourself to find out what Jesus says about these things.
It's really good. Anything you want to add to that, Steve?
No, that was just really good.
Yeah. So
very clear.
Jealousy becoming envy.
That's good.
Unforgiveness, offense, and selfishness.
And honestly, offense becomes unforgiveness.
Yeah, if you sit on it too, right?
Yeah.
Those things, I felt to talk about this today because really, I just think they are they're so easy to, as like little foxes that get in the vineyard, and they might not seem to do much damage at first, but before you know it, things are destroyed.
That's right. So that's what happens when those things grow in your garden.
And we just got to make sure that we're looking at our hearts, looking at our lives, and we are continuing
Keep short
to say,
accounts, guys.
Jesus,
Keep short accounts.
make me right, because I want to love you, I want to love other people, I want to love one another as I have been loved by you, and let's let him help
And the
us.
truth is, you don't want to get to heaven, and by then it's too late. And he said, "Away from me, I never knew you."
Yeah.
It's like, what are you talking about? I was a pastor. No, well, you had unforgiveness, and you had offense, and
Your
you
heart
had
was filled with this stuff.
you were filled with jealousy and envy.
And this is the downfall. You walk as a Christian, and you decide, no, I said I believed with my mouth. I confessed with my mouth. I believe in my heart. Mm-hmm. I'm saved. Mm-hmm. And you don't need to worry about these things. But these scriptures are in the new covenant. These are clear, delineated things that will trip a Christian up. And I don't know why we have discredited these things from being destructive to us, but they are totally destructive to us. Yeah. They will wipe us out. They will give the enemy his place to get his foothold in our life and destroy us. And I've asked Christians in crowds, how many of you feel you've had a Christian faith that did not work the way Jesus said it was supposed to work?
Yep.
And almost everyone raises their hand.
Good.
I think that the biggest adversary we have is this four-headed monster constantly attacking us, constantly poking us in the ribs, constantly offending us, causing us to want them to be punished, making it all about us. God loves you. You're so special. Instead of I love God and I owe him everything.
That's good.
And if I want to be forgiven, like Vicki says, I have to forgive.
Yeah.
And if I want to be free, I have to not be offended. And if I want to not envy and be swallowed up and devoured, I have to be happy with what God gave me and be happy for you with what God gave you. It just goes on and on and on.
That's really good.
Selfless, not selfish.
Okay, help us, Lord, to
Jesus, we need it every day.
Reveal our hearts. If there's any areas where these things have a hole in us, would you help us untangle that web and become healed and whole?
That's good.
Thank you again for joining us.
Have a great week.
Yeah, we'll catch you next time.
Bye-bye.